I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Imperfect cinema rejects exhibitionism in both literal senses of the word, the narcissistic and the commercial, getting shown in established theaters and circuits. It should be remembered that the death of the star system turned out to be a positive thing for art. There is no reason to doubt that the disappearance of the director as star will fail to offer similar prospects. Imperfect cinema must start work now, in cooperation with sociologists, revolutionary leaders, psychologists, economists, etc. Furthermore, imperfect cinema rejects whatever services criticisms have to offer and considers the function of mediators and intermediaries anachronistic. Imperfect cinema is no longer interested in quality or technique. It can be created equally well with a Mitchell or with an 8mm camera, or in a studio or in a guerrilla camp in the middle of the jungle. Imperfect cinema is no longer interested in predetermined taste and much less in good taste. It is not quality which it seeks in artistic work. The only thing it is interested in is how an artist responds to the following question: what are you doing in order to overcome the barrier of the cultured elite audience, which up to now has conditioned the form of your work? So this whole section is him speaking about what imperfect cinema does, right? And some of it I can say can be somewhat unique to the particular situation of Cuba at the time, but I think the sentiment there is wide ranging. Um, and one of the things I think is important here is this line: in cooperation with sociologists, revolutionary leaders, psychologists, economists. And this is interesting because there was a time, I think, in that period in the 60s, and this is something I like to talk a lot about, in the 70s during that revolutionary period, where those filmmakers were directly connected to the revolutionary scholars and actual revolutionaries. They were friends. They worked together. They supported each other. And I actually find one of the reasons why I have such a criticism of political cinema of today is it seems to be totally devoid of political activity, and these types of people who exist today. And I do think this is a two frontal issue. I don't think this is like just the filmmakers' fault or just the revolutionaries or the the scholars' fault. I think it's an issue. We've been, but I think we've been purposely separated. We've been purposely separated, and it's a huge problem. And then I think is there any more there? Go down.
So just quickly, no, that's it. I
Oh,
think,
and I wanted to,
yeah.
and then like the last line is very art will not disappear into nothingness, it will disappear into everything. And this is kind of his call that, and if you ever think about this line in the revolutionary context, right? If your country's in a state of revolution, and we don't want art to disappear, we want it to disappear into everything. What is everything in Cuba? Everything at that point was the revolution. So they want art to disappear into revolution, and art is really just to be a part of the revolutionary process.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about who Rocha is or was? This piece, the aesthetics of hunger, and then, um, oh man, it's just got so many bars in it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Rocha, like I said before, was a Brazilian filmmaker, revolutionary filmmaker, and he would have called himself that. And he was part of a movement called Cinema Novo in Brazil. Um, that was a third cinema, revolutionary cinema movement. Rocha, I mean, to give a brief overview of his life is pretty crazy. I mean, he actually died quite young. I don't even think he lived to 50.
Mhm.
Um, but he lived in constant protest of where Brazil was. He was exiled, all types of stuff. I mean, his films are films about the continued struggles of Brazilian people. And but then he even kind of, some of his later films, he kind of gets into world struggles. He has a great film called Lion Has Seven Heads, and it's about a group of Latin revolutionaries who go to help an African revolutionary overthrow the Europeans. And it's a wild movie, right? And he was also about form and how breaking European form. Now Rocha's interesting because he was early on very loved by elites like the Cannes Film Festival, so forth and so on. And I do think he was always dubious. He was never like, okay, if they're going to show my work, I'll let them show it. But but then when they started to show their true colors, he was not shy in like telling these people that they're racist, imperialist, all of it. And there's actually a great video. I'll send it to you later of him going off on all these filmmakers. This person says he's a Marxist. He's really this. Like he's in the middle of it after a festival. Like Rocha was, but also Rocha's been like used a lot. Martin Scorsese says he's a huge fan of Rocha. He actually admits to using Rocha's aesthetic approaches in movies like Mean Streets. There's actually a video. There's a video. I'll show you.
So that means his whole career, because he's basically been remaking Mean Streets
for his whole career. Yeah, and and Scorsese, he would admit this, but also like there's another conversation. A lot of those guys were flirting with the with what they saw as the aesthetics of revolutionary work. And leftist film, all of them from Coppola, and they grabbed a lot of it and threw it into their work, and all of them, Schrader, all of them, and they would, all their influences are these very leftist people, but they took the aesthetics and not the politics.
Wow, yeah.
So
because look at, I mean, Rocha in this article, he starts off by saying, I prefer to discuss the relationship between our culture and civilized culture in less limiting terms than those which characterize the analysis of the European observer. Thus, while Latin America laments its general misery, a foreign observer cultivates a taste for that misery, not as a tragic symptom, but merely as a formal element in his field of interest. I mean, this is just... And then, but the real bars, when he said... Go ahead.
No, I wonder if it's what you're going to say, what I say and what I think, but go ahead.
Well, to me, the real bars come in the next couple of paragraphs where he says, for instance, Cinema Novo reveals that violence is normal behavior for the starving. The violence of a starving man is not a sign of a primitive mentality. Cinema Novo teaches that the aesthetics of violence are revolutionary rather than primitive. The moment of violence is the moment when the colonizer becomes aware of the existence of the colonized. Only when he is confronted with violence can the colonizer understand through horror the strength of the culture he exploits. As long as he does not take up arms, the colonized man remains a slave. The first policeman had to die before the French became aware of the Algerians.
Boom.
Son.
Boom. I shared that about a week and a half after October 7th.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.